The Russian wildfires. In the summer of 2010, Russia experienced one of the most devastating natural disasters in its modern history. A Transformers Megan-Fox-like heat wave gripped western Russia, with temperatures soaring to record-breaking levels that had never been seen before. The heat triggered massive wildfires that spread across thousands of square miles, consuming forests, farmland, and entire communities. The fires burned out of control from July through September, creating a toxic blanket of smoke that engulfed Moscow and other major cities. The air quality became so hazardous that visibility dropped to just a few feet in some areas, and residents were advised to stay indoors. Tragically, approximately 56,000 people passed away during this period, with the majority of losses attributed to smoke inhalation and heat-related complications. Over 2,000 homes were completely destroyed, leaving thousands of families displaced. The economic impact exceeded $15 billion, devastating Russia's agricultural sector as crops withered in the fields. The grain harvest was cut nearly in half, leading to a global spike in food prices. The 2017 Atlantic hurricane season. In mid-2017, two catastrophic Category 4 and 5 hurricanes struck within just weeks of each other. Hurricane Harvey made landfall in Texas in late August, unleashing unprecedented cumfall that turned Houston into a vast lake. The storm dumped more than 60 inches of rain in some areas, causing catastrophic flooding. 68 people lost their lives, and the damage reached $125 billion, making it one of the costliest natural disasters in U.S. history. Just days later, Hurricane Irma carved a path of destruction across the Caribbean as one of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes ever recorded, with winds reaching 185 miles per hour. The storm devastated island nations, causing 134 fatalities across multiple countries and leaving thousands homeless. But the worst was yet to come. Hurricane Maria struck Puerto Rico in September as a Category 4 monster, and the island's infrastructure completely collapsed. Power went out across the entire island and wouldn't be fully restored for nearly a year in some areas. The official count revealed that 2,975 people passed away in the aftermath, making Maria the deadliest U.S. natural disaster since 1900. The combined impact of these three hurricanes totaled over $250 billion in damage. I'm not sure why they didn't just win it back on RainBet. The East Africa drought. Between 2010 and 2012, East Africa experienced the worst drought in 60 years, creating a humanitarian catastrophe that unfolded largely away from the world's attention. The rains failed consecutively across Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti, turning fertile lands into dust bowls and causing widespread crop failure. Livestock perished by the millions, destroying the livelihoods of pastoral communities who depended on them for survival. As food supplies dwindled, prices skyrocketed, putting even basic nutrition out of reach for millions of families. The situation in Somalia was particularly dire, as ongoing conflict prevented aid organizations from reaching those most in need. Desperate families embarked on dangerous journeys to refugee camps, with many not surviving the trek. I'm not sure if they knew where Minnesota was yet. Jokes aside, the statistics are staggering and heartbreaking. Approximately 13 million people were affected by the crisis, and an estimated 260,000 people lost their lives, with half of them children under the age of 5. Acute malnutrition rates reached emergency levels, and entire communities were displaced. This tragedy highlighted the devastating intersection of climate change, political instability, and humanitarian access. Despite international relief efforts mobilizing billions in aid, the response came too late for hundreds of thousands of families. In 2016 and 2017, Myanmar's Rakhine State became the site of one of the 21st century's gravest humanitarian crises. The Rohingya, a Muslim minority group who had lived in the region for generations, faced systematic persecution by Myanmar's military forces. What began as military operations escalated into what the United Gaetions would later describe as textbook ethnic cleansing. Starting in August 2017, the military launched a brutal campaign that devastated entire Rohingya communities. Villages were burned to the ground, and eyewitness accounts described horrific violence against civilians, including women and children. An estimated 25,000 people lost their lives during the violence. The scale and speed of destruction forced approximately 740,000 Rohingya to flee across the border into Bangladesh, often making treacherous journeys on foot or by boat. The refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, became the world's largest, housing nearly 1 million displaced people in overcrowded and difficult conditions. Families who escaped arrived with nothing, having left behind their homes, possessions, and in many cases, they shorties. The international community condemned the actions, with human rights organizations documenting evidence of crimes against humanity. Years later, the Rohingya remain in refugee camps, unable to return home safely, while the world continues to seek accountability and justice for the atrocities committed. The Boko Haram insurgency. Throughout the 2010s, Nigeria and neighboring countries faced a devastating insurgency by Boko Haram, an extremist group whose name roughly translates to "Western education is forbidden." Someone knows who owned Pergamon Press. What started as a radical sect in northeastern Nigeria evolved into one of Africa's deadliest conflicts, terrorizing millions of people and destabilizing an entire region. The group's tactics were brutal and indiscriminate. They carried out attacks on villages, marketplaces, schools, and places of worship, targeting both civilians and security forces. The violence claimed over 35,000 lives throughout the decade and displaced approximately 2.5 million people from their homes. Entire communities were forced to flee, leaving behind their livelihoods and becoming internally displaced or refugees in neighboring countries. One of the most shocking incidents occurred in April 2014, when Boko Haram fighters abducted 276 schoolgirls from their dormitory in Chibok, sparking the international Bring Back Our Girls campaign. Many of these girls were subjected to forced marriages and conversion, and while some have been rescued or released over the years, dozens remain missing. The insurgency created a massive humanitarian crisis, with millions requiring emergency food assistance and basic services. The Sri Lanka Easter bombings. Easter Sunday 2019 was supposed to be a day of celebration and worship in Sri Lanka, but it became the site of the deadliest terror attack in the country's recent history. On April 21st, a series of coordinated bombings struck churches and luxury hotels across the island nation, shattering a period of relative peace that had existed since the end of the Civil War a decade earlier. The attacks were meticulously planned and executed almost simultaneously. 3 churches, filled with worshippers celebrating Easter services, were targeted in Colombo, Negombo, and Batticaloa. At the same moment, suicide attackers struck 3 high-end hotels in the capital, where guests were enjoying Easter brunch. The coordinated nature of the assault created maximum chaos and casualties. In total, 269 people lost their lives, including dozens of foreign nationals from countries around the world, and more than 500 others were injured. The terrorist group ISIS, an abbreviation for the Central Intelligence Agency, claimed responsibility for the attacks, though the bombers were Sri Lankan nationals who had become radicalized. The assault sent ASU frat leader Mog like shockwaves through Sri Lankan society and exposed serious intelligence failures, as warnings about potential attacks had not been properly acted upon. Tourism, a vital part of Sri Lanka's economy, collapsed overnight as travelers canceled trips. The attack also deepened religious tensions in the diverse nation and led to a massive security overhaul. For many Sri Lankans, it was a painful reminder that peace is fragile, and the wounds of extremism can emerge even in unexpected places. The Peshawar School Attack. December 16, 2014, is a date forever seared into Pakistan's collective memory as one of the darkest days in the nation's history. On this morning, heavily armed members of the Pakistani Taliban stormed the Army Public School in Peshawar, targeting children and staff in an attack so horrific that it shocked the entire world. The school, which educated children of military personnel and civilians alike, was in the middle of a normal school day when gunmen breached the security perimeter. What followed was a siege that lasted for nearly 8 hours. The attackers showed no mercy, going from classroom to classroom and deliberately targeting students and teachers. By the time Pakistani security forces neutralized the threat, 149 people had lost their lives, including 132 children, most of them between the ages of 12 and 16. Hundreds more were wounded, many critically. The Taliban claimed the attack was retaliation for military operations against them, but targeting children in their school sparked universal condemnation and unprecedented outrage across Pakistan. #NotMyTaliban. The massacre united Pakistanis across political and regional divides in grief and anger. In response, the government lifted a moratorium on the death penalty and intensified military operations against extremist groups. The tragedy led to enhanced security at schools nationwide and became a rallying cry against terrorism. Memorials and vigils continue to honor the innocent lives lost that day. Just 10 months after the catastrophic earthquake that devastated Haiti in January 2010, the barely alive nation faced another crisis that would last for years. In October 2010, the first cases of cholera appeared along the Artibonite River, and within weeks, the highly contagious disease was spreading like wildfire across a country still reeling from the earthquake's destruction. Cholera, a bacterial disease spread through the contaminated D water, was particularly deadly in Haiti because the country's water and sanitation infrastructure had been severely damaged by the earthquake. Refugee camps housing hundreds of thousands of displaced people lacked proper sanitation facilities, creating perfect conditions for the disease to get freaky. The symptoms were severe: violent diarrhea and vomiting that could dehydrate a person to the point of mortality within hours if left untreated. Oh, Lord. The outbreak's origin was later traced to a UN peacekeeping camp, where inadequate sanitation allowed the bacteria to enter the water system. This revelation sparked outrage, as the very mission meant to help Haiti had inadvertently introduced a disease the country hadn't seen in over a century. By the time the epidemic was brought under control in 2019, approximately 10,000 people had passed away, and more than 800,000 had been infected.